as I promised, we are going to work on particular tensile strength exercises for your wrist. Now, obviously, this is going to irradiate and start to recruit the rest of your joints into the motion. But you're going to initially feel this most excruciatingly wonderful in your wrists. Okay? I need you to go slowly, slow when you're working through this exercise, all of them. And I need you to go incremental. Do one or two, test them out. Do not put weight on your back. Do not blast through the exercises. Don't do it on concrete initially. And don't do it with friends cheering you on. Work on the developmental increase of the tensile strength of the tissues in your joints. All right. Now, some of you remember, if you've forgotten, you better go back, to work on the particular press-up of rotating from the first volume. Okay? We're going to make this a little more challenging. We're going to be going completely lateral, working from one side to the next. When you work on this, you're going to have to recruit your shoulder or you'll never be able to press up. You can't press up on bicep strength. You need to weight transfer and recruit your shoulder into the motion. Fair enough. Go and work on this, then we'll come back to another exercise. This one being the top of your hand as if you're holding a knife. Place this down onto the mat. Roll down onto your fist and then roll back. This is going to be the exercise. Start with here, because what we're going to add on to it is your own body weight. Back and forth. From here. Back and forth. Now, what I want you to do is take a breather before you try out this next exercise. If not, come back to this tomorrow. Turn off the tape now because this is going to be tough. I want you to work on pressing up to your wrists and then pressing up to your fists. When you do this coordinated, it's going to take a great deal of effort to keep your wrist tensile strong, keeping this brace. So what we're going to work on are particular specific exercises. Some of you may or may have not seen these. This particular, I want you to take the ridge of your hand, and place this out parallel, and arch your back into this. If you're feeling adventurous, start to press up, but go slowly. Go slowly. You'll tear this very easily if you don't work on the development of the attribute in your wrist. This should be pretty thorough by now. Come to your wrist from here. Bring this aligned with your forearm. You've been working on the lateral, but now this press is with the wrist already collapsed. From here. This is going to be a little challenging. Take this and switch it now. I promise, I will be torturing you later, but for now, torture yourself here. Forward and roll. Roll by pressing your elbows out. If you want to release some of the residual tension, come right to this exercise. If not, wait until the next day. Arch and extend your elbows. Bend and arch. Bend and arch. One of my favorites, if you watch recent Disney cartoons, is a monkey knuckle. Take these three, two leading, this will be the surface on the ground, and your thumb, and place this on the ground to get a purchase. Then you're going to press up, back and forth. We already said from here. I want you to take now, this is probably going to be one of the most critical. Notice that you're not locking your fingers out and pressing from here, but each joint has to be clawed in so that you're working on the particular tensile strength of each joint, each phalange. Work here, starting here first. When we're going to go on in just a moment, We're going to do the same routine with the ankles. Common sense disclaimer. If something is severely uncomfortable, stop. When we go on to the next exercise, I need you to focus upon what physiological events are occurring within your body. Don't try to accomplish an exercise. You cannot win at building the strength in your tissue. You can only develop. If you try and fight through this exercise, I guarantee you an injury. So don't fight through the exercise. Go to your current range of motion, go just a bit beyond, and relax and come off of it. When we work on the ankles, I see so many ankle injuries, it's not worth discussing. You need to work on the tensile strength of your ankles in all range of motions. We're going to begin with turning the foot, splaying it inside. Turn the sole of your foot towards the outside wall. Rest, bend your knee, rest your weight on top of it. Start transferring your weight so that you're on the foot sword, and bring the other into the same position. Once you're comfortable here, which might take a few weeks, I want you to step along a straight line, keeping your knees bent, backwards and forwards, so that you're working on developing the strength in a range of motion. How many times have we seen this motion? Because of the flaccid value of the tissues in the ankle. You need to be developing the tensile strength in the tendons now, so that when you do overtread this ankle, it's only leading into a subsequent motion. You have recovered that full range of motion because you've protected it by augmenting the tissues with tensile strength. Opposite direction. Please spread out your legs on this, or you're going to injure your knees. Bring them splayed. So now you're turning your instep downward from here. Now you may remember from the shin roll in the first volume that you need to have a 45-degree access to the ground for your knee, instead of this ridiculous two-dimensional biomotor function which will put undue stress and compromise the integrity of your joints. 45-degree angle, because the tissues are meant to work in a rotational value. Both directions. Now your little drunken stupor, walk back and forth so that you're working on developing the tissue strength in a range of motion. What I'm going to ask you to do next is going to take a bit of chutzpah. I need you to work on carefully rolling your toes underneath, because we're going to come up on top of them once we develop the strength of the arch. Dancers intuitively know if they need to put undue stress on the tissue of the foot, you need to develop the strength in a range of motion, because the foot is not one brick. It's highly articulated, just like the wrist and hand. Roll your toes forward, start transferring weight back and forth, increasing the amount of load that you're placing upon the ankle. You're going to notice just from the wrist exercises, this is also true for the alignment on the lower appendage, that you need to place all of the force along a particular line. Otherwise, so come back to the circles that we worked on initially. Now, place one up, switch, place the other. You can start by grabbing a wall just to balance yourself once your toes get acclimated to load bearing along with the development of an arch. If you have flat feet or a fallen arch, this is the best way to start to recover your ability to recruit force from the earth, from rooting, because of the development of an arch. Once you're comfortable with this, I'm going to ask you this. Once you're comfortable with this, up on top, and start to walk. This is going to be excruciating at first, so take baby steps, hold on to the wall, and develop these incrementally. Back to the initial exercise. You're comfortable, right? We're masters at this, right? Wrong. Go work on it incrementally. Develop the strength in your tissues. And once you have, turn the video back on and come back. Remember position number 2 from the first volume? How about position number 1? That's good enough. Come back, and we're going to add this into this particular exercise that we worked on in the beginning. We worked on this particular squat. This should be comfortable by now because you've been working on that exercise. The load bearing in this position should be simple. Turning that onto the insteps of the foot is going to be a particularly new challenge. Notice how the foot is load bearing. It's not rotating over and placing undue stress. I'm going to do it to you. Turn the toes down so that now you're resting and creating that artificial arch. From here, as you stand up, the alignment has to be correct, or you're going to be over-rotating, which should have been worked on in this initial exercise. So once again, place, create the arch, and then press up. Once you're comfortable with that, we're going to be doing repetitions of those exercises on your own, in the comfort of your own home, taking your time and working incrementally. One last exercise. Once we're in this position, what I want you to do is place your hands down on the inside. Now this is one last wrist strength exercise. Your knees should be on the outside of your elbows. Reason being, your hands are turned in at 45-degree angles, and we're going to work on the wrist strength and a balance. Because if you want stability, you start in mobility. If you want stability, you start in mobility. So the ability to balance is going to increase the strength of the tissues so that your fingers are now driving in and holding the earth with as much tensile strength as the feet do naturally. When we go into feature volumes, we're going to be taking those acrobatics and magnifying them, increasing their amplification. It's going to be challenging, so you need to start with these particular joint strength exercises. One of the other senior trainers at RMAX, Ben Brackbill, is going to help me with these next full body complex exercises because it's going to be difficult to narrate and both do them. I'll be ripping the mic off of my body if I try this. So Ben is going to take us through these exercises. I'm going to point out some of the positions. Now, we're coming back to position number 1. He's going to take his leg and slide through as he posts in a clean point so that he has his balance along 3 points. Notice that the leg is just resting along the side. There shouldn't be any strain here. We've already worked on the wrist strength. He's going to take his arm and reach. The plane here is along the length of his torso. He's stretching out. As he does so, you can see that he's going to open up the pelvis and lift. And when he comes back down, he's going to carefully bring this back together. He'll stretch out one more time. Now look at the plane. It comes straight along this line. This is where you're stretching. Okay. Make sure that you don't do these in isolation and just stretch. You'll end up pulling a muscle. Remember, if you work in isolation, you'll perform in isolation. If you work organically, you'll perform with a coordinated, recruited movement program. Next part of this exercise. Instead of the plane of along the torso, we're going to now take the hand back and stretch out the whole torso area. All of the muscles pushing from the pelvis and the solar plexus, recruited with the lunar plexus pulling outward, reaching this arm backward and back down. We'll do this one more time and reach and open up so that you're stretching out throughout the whole body, all of the joints coordinated together and back down. Remember, I can't emphasize this enough. If you stretch in isolation, that lends its performance to isolation. That's why you have to work in coordinated movement programs so that your movement is in a range of motion with the rest of the joint programming. Third variation on the exercise. Breathe on this one because you're going to be constricting the thoracic capacity. You're going to be closing off. As the muscle tissue is wrapped around into the spine, you're also working and opening up the pelvic girdle. And we mentioned this in the first tape, and come back. I'm not going to talk the whole way through. The largest ligament in your body, the iliofemoral ligament, is going to be loading as you're wrenching in the opposite direction. You need to reach through between your planted foot and your planted hand so that the tissues come around and load the spine and back. The ability to load the spine and coordinate your joint tissues along with it is fundamental to your motoric programming. So reach underneath, exhale. Respiration will prohibit you, if you hold your breath, it'll prohibit you from your movement. The ability to generate that intra-abdominal and intra-lung pressure through compression is going to lend itself to the high degree of mobility. In just a moment, we're going to move on to a different segment and a different set, which is going to require the tensile strength that we worked on with our joint tissues. Position number 1, we've now brought into, now this doesn't have to be a wall, you can use a chair, you can use a friend or a partner, but since this is solo drills, I want you to count on the environment that you have at hand to train. So, using the wall, adopt position number 2 and bring your foot over onto your far thigh. This is going to take you being able to concentrate on the tensile strength of position number 1 on one leg. Now, if you're having trouble with this, first take the foot and place it right down in front. As you're working on this for a few weeks, it'll become easier and easier to just adopt this posture, carrying all of the load onto one joint. We're going to make this a little more challenging. We're going to take this and now place and press on the outside of the knee. And notice how it's starting to open up onto the pelvic girdle so that you're working and opening up this expansion here, like we worked on with that figure 8 at the beginning. Press down, release the tension, press and open up. Give your pelvis a push forward so that you see how he's bringing his lunar plexus forward as the knee goes down. Take your time on this so that you're not tearing tissues, but building strength. Next, as you're here, take your leg out directly, 90-degree angle to your other. Open up the pelvis. Now look at what Ben's doing. He's turning this backward at a 45-degree angle. Initially, this is going to be excruciating because of the rotational value on the tendons and ligaments. Turning it backwards. You won't be able to get this initially. Start with just upright and want to. Issue the will to go backwards. Eventually this will start going further and further and further backward, and I'm going to help him just a little. And you'll find that the tissues do relax. And we talked about this in volume 1, the stretch reflex. What's keeping your flexibility is not because your tissues have not been maladapted and torn and rended. What's keeping your flexibility from occurring is fear reactivity. Your discomfort with an unfamiliar motion. The tissues pull backwards and resist against it. As you work on the tensile strength, it's going to lend itself a kinesthetic confidence that'll give you back your natural flexibility. So start to allow this to drop backwards. In the next exercise, bring your leg all the way behind. Look, again, Ben's adopting the alignment that's necessary so that you're load bearing on the entire arch and ankle. Don't start leaning forward or you're going to put undue stress on joints and start to compromise the joint integrity. Keep the alignment proper, lifting along the spine so each joint's holding the particular weight transfer. Ben's going to do one thing. He's going to put his hand against the wall and he's going to lift his leg off the ground. What we're going to work on to eventually is transferring the weight from a balanced posture. What I want you to do at home is to start depending less upon support so that you're balancing upon individual structure, load bearing at the ankles. Okay, this is just going to be incremental. What we'll go on to next is we'll see in the third tape how we can take the tensile strength that we've developed in the individual joint complexes, how we've recruited the joints so that we have an overall motoric program, and take the elementary biomechanics from volume 1 and start to compose complex motor sets.